A sinner is someone who is deficient with regard to this matter of righteousness, this rightness with God. But Christ in His preaching not only preached about the sinner's lack of righteousness, He preached about His abundant supply of righteousness. Although the sinner has no credible righteousness of their own, Christ in the gospel, He comes to offer to the sinner a righteousness that brings him into a state whereby they are accepted by God, by perfectly obeying God's law. Christ merited righteousness for those who trust in Him. That righteousness, Christ's perfect righteousness, becomes the sinner when they cast away their own self-righteousness and receive by faith from Christ His righteousness. Now you say, preacher, what's your hope of heaven tonight? Is your hope of heaven based on the fact that you're a preacher and you're a minister in a church? Is your hope of heaven, preacher, that you go to church and a place of worship every Lord's Day as God permits it and as health permits it? Preacher, is your hope of heaven based on how many prayers you've said or how much the Bible you know? Is your hope of heaven based on your charitable deeds and your good living? Can I say tonight, my hope of heaven, as the hymn writer put it, is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. That's my hope of heaven. Now let me ask you, is that your hope of heaven? Your hope of heaven cannot be based upon your mother or your father's profession of faith or their Christian living. But it must be based on the blood, the work of Christ at the cross and His righteousness. I trust that you come this evening to understand that there's a lack of righteousness on your part, and at the very same time, that you'll see that though there is a lack, a deficiency with regard to the righteousness that is required, in Jesus Christ there is a fullness of righteousness. He becomes righteousness to us. He is our righteousness.